The phone rang at 2:17 a.m. Dakota stared at the ceiling, already awake. She hadn't slept. Not really. For the past 36 hours, her world had narrowed into one single possibility and one terrifying outcome. Her palms were sweating. Her throat felt dry. On the other end of that call was either validation or humiliation. And what happened in the next 90 seconds would become, in her words, the two most stressful days of my entire career. But what no one knew at the time was that those same days would end in something she described as pure euphoria. But to understand why, we have to go back. Most people see Dakota Fanning as the composed child prodigy who grew up gracefully in Hollywood. From starring opposite legends at age 7 to building a respected adult career without scandal. But here's the truth most people don't know. There was a moment, not when she was a child, but as an adult actress, when everything felt like it might slip away. Not because of failure, but because of expectation. And that pressure nearly broke her. If you've ever stood on the edge of something important, if you've ever felt the weight of "this has to work," you'll understand why these 2 days changed her forever. By the time Dakota reached her late 20s, she had already lived a lifetime on camera. She had worked with Hollywood royalty. She had navigated the difficult transition from child star to adult actress, something many never survive professionally. But here's the quiet fear that lingers for former child actors. What if you peak too early? What if people still see you as that little girl? What if you never prove you can carry something serious, something transformative? In 2023, a script landed on her desk. It was bold, psychological, emotionally raw, the kind of role that could redefine her image, but also the kind that could expose her. The character was complicated, morally gray, fragile, and intense. And Dakota felt something she hadn't felt in years. Fear. Because this wasn't safe. This wasn't polished studio territory. This was risky. And she wanted it desperately. But what happened next changed everything. Auditions at Dakota's level aren't simple. They're layered. Meetings. Chemistry reads. Silent evaluations. Executives analyzing not just performance, but market value. She prepared obsessively. Lines memorized. Character backstory mapped. Emotional triggers rehearsed. But inside, something unfamiliar was happening. Doubt. She started questioning. Am I too known for this? Will they see me as capable of this darkness? What if I walk in and they just see former child star? The first stressful day began with a screen test. Bright lights. Cold room. Minimal crew. No music. Just silence. She delivered the scene, a breakdown moment, where the character confronts betrayal. It required vulnerability she hadn't accessed publicly before. When she finished, no one reacted. No applause. No smiles. Just quiet note-taking. And that silence? It was deafening. She left unsure if she had just secured the role or ruined her chance. But the second day would be worse. Much worse. 24 hours later, her agent called. They want you back. That should have felt good. But it didn't. Because this wasn't a formality. It was a comparison round. 2 actresses. 1 role. 1 final decision. And she knew the other actress. Respected. Critically acclaimed. Edgy. The kind of performer who thrives in roles like this. The second day wasn't just about performance. It was about proving evolution. In the waiting area, Dakota could hear the other actress rehearsing lines under her breath. Confident. Controlled. Dakota's hands trembled. What if this is where my momentum stops? What if I never get another chance like this? When her name was called, she walked in feeling like her entire past career was being judged in that single moment. The scene was different this time. More raw. Less structured. Improvisation added. The director said, "Don't act it. Just feel it." And something inside her cracked open midway through the scene. Dakota stopped performing. She stopped thinking about camera angles, stopped worrying about how she looked, stopped controlling. And, for the first time in years, she let go. Tears weren't forced. They surprised her. Her voice shook, not theatrically but honestly. There was a long pause. So long she thought she had messed up. But the director leaned forward and whispered, "That's it." That moment lasted maybe 30 seconds. But inside Dakota's body, it felt like free fall. When she walked out, she didn't feel relief. She felt exposed, like she had just shown strangers something she usually keeps protected. And now she had to wait. Again. Back to 2:17 a.m. The phone ringing. Her heart racing. She answered. Her agent didn't waste time. "You got it." Silence. Dakota didn't scream. Didn't cry immediately. There was just stillness. And then something shifted. A wave. Relief first. Then validation. Then something deeper. Euphoria. Not because she beat someone. Not because she won. But because she proved to herself she could access that depth. That she wasn't trapped in her past identity. That she had evolved. Those 2 days weren't about a role. They were about self-trust. And no one saw that coming. The filming process was intense. Emotionally draining. But different now. Because she had already survived the hardest part, doubt. Crew members later mentioned how present she felt on set. How grounded. How fearless. And that's the irony. The most stressful days of her career unlocked the most confident version of herself. Here's what most people misunderstand about success. The breakthrough moment isn't glamorous. It's terrifying. Growth rarely feels like confidence. It feels like vulnerability. Dakota's story reminds us that pressure doesn't mean you're failing. Sometimes it means you're about to evolve. Those 2 days compressed years of self-questioning into 48 hours. And when it ended in euphoria, it wasn't the role. It was the realization. I can do this. What would you do if everything you worked for came down to 2 days? Would fear stop you? Or would you let it transform you? Years from now, people will talk about that performance. About how nuanced it was. How fearless. But Dakota will remember something else. The sleepless night. The silence after the first audition. The trembling hands before the second. And the whisper. That's it. Because sometimes, the most stressful days of your life are simply the doorway to becoming who you were meant to be. And that is where euphoria lives. Perfect. Now we slow everything down. We go deeper. Because those 2 most stressful days didn't begin in the audition room. They began years earlier. And what you're about to hear is the part no one talks about. Before the sleepless night. Before the 2:17 a.m. phone call. Before the trembling hands. There was a little girl standing under blinding lights for the first time. Dakota Fanning wasn't just a child actor. She was the child actor. Precocious. Polished. Poised beyond her years. Directors called her old soul. Producers called her bankable. Co-stars called her professional. But here's the part people miss. When you start at the top, there's nowhere to hide. At 7 years old, she wasn't allowed to be average. She wasn't allowed to be awkward. She wasn't allowed to grow slowly. And when your identity forms under applause, you start associating love with performance. That's subtle, but it's dangerous. Because when applause becomes oxygen, silence feels like suffocation. And that fear, the fear of silence, followed her into adulthood. The transition nobody prepares you for. The industry has a pattern. It builds child stars. Then it forgets them. The public loves watching talent emerge. But they love reinvention even more. And if you don't reinvent fast enough, you disappear. Dakota watched it happen to others. Young actors who once headlined premieres, suddenly struggling for auditions. Some rebelled. Some retreated. Some broke under the weight of expectations. She refused to implode publicly. Instead, she chose something quieter.
discipline,
education, selective roles. But even with smart decisions, one thought kept echoing. What if I already showed them everything I have? What if I peaked before I even understood myself? And that question sat quietly in the back of her mind, waiting. The script that hit too close. When the psychological drama script arrived in 2023, it wasn't flashy. No massive studio banner. No guaranteed box office win. But the character was unraveling. A woman who appears controlled until she isn't. Someone balancing reputation and hidden chaos. Dakota read it once, then again, then a third time, and she realized something uncomfortable. She understood this character more than she wanted to admit, because the fear of losing control, the fear of not being enough, the fear of being misunderstood, wasn't fictional. It was personal. And that's why the audition terrified her. Because she wouldn't just be performing. She'd be revealing. And that's a different kind of risk. The morning of day one felt sterile. Los Angeles sunlight poured through her kitchen windows. Birds chirped. Traffic hummed in the distance. Everything looked normal. But inside her chest?
chaos.
She rehearsed the confrontation scene again. A mirror. A kitchen counter. Her own reflection staring back at her. Don't overthink it. She whispered it to herself like a mantra. But when she arrived at the studio lot, something shifted. The building wasn't massive. In fact, it was quiet. Indie projects always are. No red carpets. No screaming fans. Just security badges and fluorescent hallways.
She checked in, sat down,
and immediately noticed something unusual. There were no other actors waiting, which meant one thing. They were spacing them out carefully. This was serious. A casting assistant called her name. Her heels clicked softly against the polished floor. Every step sounded louder than it should have. Inside the audition room, 3 producers, the director, 1 camera operator, a single chair, no small talk, no warm-up conversation. The director smiled politely. Whenever you're ready. And that was it. No music. No emotional buildup. Just air. She began. The first few lines were steady, measured, professional. But halfway through, she felt it. That old instinct.
to control the emotion,
To shape it perfectly. To make it look impressive. And suddenly she wasn't in the scene anymore. She was performing the scene. There's a difference.
and she knew it.
Her mind split in two. One half delivering dialogue. The other half whispering, "This isn't real enough." But she kept going. Finished. Silence. The director looked down at his notes. One producer leaned back. No one smiled. No one frowned. Just nods. "Thank you, Dakota." And that was it. No feedback. No direction. Nothing to read. She walked out into the hallway feeling smaller than when she entered. What if I just played it safe? What if safe isn't enough? The 24 hours between. That night was worse than the audition itself. She replayed everything. The pauses. The tone. The eye contact. The breathing. Actors do this. They dissect themselves mercilessly. Her phone buzzed. Text from a friend. "How'd it go?" She typed. "Good." Then deleted it.
Typed.
Not sure. That was the truth. And uncertainty is more exhausting than failure. Because failure is definitive. Uncertainty is endless. She barely slept. When her agent called the next morning and said they wanted her back, her stomach dropped. Because that meant it wasn't enough. Yet, the second audition was structured differently. Now there were 2 actresses, 2 chairs, 1 decision. And Dakota immediately felt the shift in energy. Competition changes oxygen in a room. Even when it's polite. Even when it's silent. The other actress, let's call her Claire, had a reputation for intensity. Indie darling. Fearless.
Raw.
Exactly the vibe this role demanded. Dakota respected her. which made it worse. Because losing to someone talented hurts more than losing to someone unprepared. In the waiting area, Claire closed her eyes and breathed slowly.
Calm. Centered.
Dakota tried to mirror that composure, but her heart was racing. She asked herself something she had never asked before. If I don't get this, will people start seeing me as limited? That fear didn't come from ego. It came from history. Child stars are given grace once, not twice. Her name was called. Round 2 began, the moment that changed everything. This time, the director adjusted the setup. No chair. No blocking. Walk.
Move.
Make it yours. Improvisation added. More vulnerability required. And then he said something that disarmed her completely. Stop trying to be good. That sentence hit like a lightning strike, because she had built her entire career on being good, professional, reliable,
Precise.
but this role didn't want precision. It wanted rupture. So she did something she hadn't done in years. She stopped aiming. She stopped shaping. She stopped protecting her image. And mid-scene, her voice cracked unexpectedly. Not controlled. Not planned.
Real.
And for a split second, she considered pulling back, regaining composure. But she didn't. She let the crack stay. And that decision changed everything. There's a specific kind of silence that follows honesty. It's different from awkward silence. It's heavier, more electric. When she finished the scene, no one spoke immediately. The director's eyes were locked on her. Not analyzing, absorbing. He finally leaned forward and quietly said, "That felt dangerous." Dangerous. Not polished. Not impressive. Dangerous. And in that word, she knew something had shifted. But she still had to wait. The night of 2:17 a.m. Back to the cold open. Her apartment was dark. Los Angeles quiet at that hour. She hadn't turned on the TV. Hadn't scrolled. Just lay there, thinking, what if I went too far? What if they think I'm unstable for this role? Actors live in paradox. You must reveal yourself, but not too much. You must be raw, but still controlled. The phone lit up, her agent's name glowing in the dark. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She answered, "You got it." And in that instant, everything inside her shifted. Not just relief, not just excitement, validation, of growth, of risk, of letting go. And that's when the euphoria hit. Not explosive, not loud, but deep, like a wave washing over months, maybe years, of quiet doubt. She whispered, "Thank God." But what she meant was, "Thank God I trusted myself." This was only the beginning. Because getting the role was one thing. Filming it would push her even further. And what happened on set would test whether that euphoria could survive reality. If you want the next chapter, where the pressure returned in an unexpected way, say, when Dakota Fanning hung up that 2:17 a.m. call, she felt light, weightless, validated. She had taken the risk. She had exposed herself. And it worked. For about 48 hours, everything felt possible. Texts flooded in. Her agent was energized. The director called to talk through character development. "You found something in that room," he told her. "Don't lose it." But that sentence lingered longer than expected. Don't lose it. Because here's the truth. Audition bravery is one thing. Sustained vulnerability over months of filming? That's something else entirely. And 3 weeks later, standing on set for the first day of principal photography, the doubt came back. First day on set, a different kind of pressure. The location was a converted industrial loft in downtown Los Angeles. Exposed brick, muted tones, a controlled, intimate set. Indie filmmaking energy, focused and intense. The crew wasn't massive, but they were sharp, intentional. Every person chosen carefully. Dakota arrived early. She always does. Hair and makeup were minimal for this role. The character wasn't polished, which meant there was nowhere to hide. No glamour. No filters. Just face. Just emotion. She caught her reflection in the trailer mirror. For a split second, she didn't see a former child star. She saw a woman about to test herself again. And then she heard the call. Pictures up. The first scene of the day? Not light.
Not warm.
But emotionally heavy. The director didn't ease her into it. He wanted momentum. And momentum requires risk. The weight of expectation. Here's something audiences rarely consider.